My parents are pressuring me to quit my job and take over the family business, but I have other plans and then, hey everyone, I'm Caleb, 29, and I guess I'm just looking for advice or even just validation because my life's been feeling like one big guilt trip lately. So here's the deal. My family owns a construction business. It's been in the family for 3 generations. My dad, Jack, runs the show. My mom, Diane, handles the office side of things, and my older sister, Lauren, has been working there since she graduated college. From the outside, we probably look like this perfect, hardworking family living the American dream. But here's the catch. I've never wanted to be a part of it. For as long as I can remember, my dad has talked about the business like it's our legacy, and I was just supposed to fall in line. But I'm a software developer, working for this incredible tech company that I love. I've been here for 5 years, just got promoted, and honestly, I feel like I'm thriving. The problem is, my parents don't see it that way. It all kind of boiled over last weekend. My parents invited me over for Sunday dinner, which isn't unusual. They love their little family gatherings. Lauren was there too, of course, and things started off fine. My mom made her famous pot roast, and my dad talked about this new housing development project they're bidding on. I thought it was just another casual meal until my dad cleared his throat and said, "Caleb, it's time we had a serious talk about your future." Now, I've heard this speech before. It's always some version of, when are you going to stop playing around with computers and join the family business? But this time, it was different. My dad wasn't just hinting. He was laying down the law. He said, "I'm not getting any younger, and neither is your mother. This business is your birthright. We've worked too hard for you to just throw it all away." I tried to keep my cool. I said, "Dad, I'm happy where I am. I love my job. I'm doing well, and it's just not my thing." But that wasn't good enough for him. He went on this rant about how real men build things with their hands and how my tech career was just sitting behind a screen all day. He called it a waste of potential. Lauren chimed in too, of course. She's been working with my dad since she was 22, and she's fully on board with the whole family legacy thing. She said, "You don't understand how much they've sacrificed for us, Caleb. This isn't just about you. It's about all of us." My mom tried the guilt trip angle. She said, "Do you really want to see everything your father and I have built just disappear? What would your grandfather think?" By the end of dinner, I felt like I was suffocating. My dad flat out told me that if I didn't step up, they'd have to sell the business. He said, "It'll be on your shoulders if we lose everything." I left feeling like the worst son in the world. That night, I vented to my girlfriend, Paige. She's amazing, smart, driven, runs her own online boutique. But even she seemed a little overwhelmed by all of this. She told me, "You have to stand your ground, Caleb. You can't let them guilt you into giving up everything you've worked for." She's right, of course, but it's easier said than done. My parents have this way of making me feel like I owe them my entire life. The next day, I grabbed drinks with my best friend, Aiden. He's known me since high school and has always been my go-to for advice. I told him everything, and he said, "Dude, it sounds like your dad is projecting his dreams onto you. Just because he built a business doesn't mean you have to sacrifice your own dreams to keep it going." But then he said something that stuck with me. "You should think about why they're pushing so hard. Maybe there's more to this than they're telling you." And you know what? He might be right. I've always assumed my parents wanted me to take over because they're sentimental about the family business. But now I'm starting to wonder if there's something else going on. Here's where things get even weirder. The day after that dinner, I got a random LinkedIn message from this guy named Victor. He's this slick-looking entrepreneur type, and he said he's been following my work and wants to meet up to discuss a potential partnership. I have no idea how he found me or what he wants, but I'm curious. Paige thinks I should be careful. She said, "People like that don't just reach out for no reason. Make sure he's legit." So now I'm stuck between trying to navigate my family's expectations and figuring out whether this Victor guy is worth my time. I don't know. Part of me wants to tell my parents to back off and let me live my life, but another part of me feels like I'm abandoning them. Have any of you dealt with family pressure like this? How do you balance staying true to yourself without completely blowing up your relationships? So, after that awful family dinner, I decided I needed to lay low for a bit. I didn't answer my mom's daily, just checking in, texts, or pick up when my dad called. I thought maybe they'd let it go if I gave them some space. Spoiler alert, they didn't. 3 days later, Lauren showed up at my apartment unannounced. I was in the middle of debugging some code for a project when I heard a knock on the door. I opened it, and there she was, holding a coffee like she was just there for a casual chat. "Hey," she said, stepping inside before I could even respond. "We need to talk." Lauren is intense. She's the type of person who gets things done, no matter what. Growing up, she was always the golden child. Straight-A student, star athlete, first in line to join the family business. Compared to her, I was the black sheep, more interested in video games and coding than sports or construction. "Look," she started, sitting on my couch like she owned the place. "I get it. You love your job, and you're doing well for yourself. But this isn't just about you, Caleb. Mom and Dad are serious about selling the business if you don't step up. Do you really want to see that happen?" I sighed and sat down across from her. "Lauren, I don't even know how to run a construction company. I'm not you. I don't have the experience or the passion for it. You think I knew what I was doing when I started? Dad taught me everything I needed to know, and he'll do the same for you. You're his son. It's in your blood." I couldn't help but laugh at that. In my blood? "Lauren, I write code for a living. I design software, not buildings. It's not the same." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a serious tone. "Dad's not telling you everything, Caleb. The business isn't doing as well as it used to. They need you. If you don't help, they could lose everything." That hit me like a ton of bricks. My parents had always acted like the business was this unstoppable force, a symbol of our family's success. But now Lauren was telling me it was struggling? Why didn't they just say that? I asked. "Because they're proud," she said, "and they shouldn't have to beg their own son to do the right thing." I was so frustrated I could scream. I felt like I was being ambushed from all sides. Lauren left after about an hour, but not before dropping one final guilt trip. "Just think about it, okay? You'd be saving the family." The next day, I finally answered one of my dad's calls. He didn't even bother with small talk. "Lauren told me you two talked," he said. "Yeah, she did. She also told me the business isn't doing well. Is that true?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then he said, "It's nothing we can't handle. But yes, things have been tight. That's why I need you to take over. You're the only one who can bring fresh ideas to the table." I could feel my blood boiling. "So, this isn't about tradition or legacy. It's about saving the business. Why didn't you just tell me that from the start?" "Because I shouldn't have to explain myself to my own son," he snapped. "This is your responsibility, Caleb. You can't just turn your back on us." He went on and on about how much he and my mom had sacrificed to give me a good life, how they'd worked their hands to the bone to build something for the family, and how it was my duty to continue what they started. Then he hit me with the ultimatum. "If you don't take over the business, we're selling it. And if that happens, don't expect any help from us in the future." Translation: I'd be cut off. I hung up the phone and just sat there. I couldn't believe my own dad was basically threatening to disown me if I didn't fall in line. That night, I met up with Paige to talk everything over. She was as supportive as ever, but I could tell even she was starting to get a little worried about how all of this was affecting me. "You can't let them bully you into this, Caleb," she said. "You've worked too hard to throw it all away for something you don't even want." "But what if they're right?" I said. "What if I really am being selfish? If they sell the business and lose everything, it'll be my fault." Paige took my hand and looked me in the eye. "You're not responsible for their decisions. They've been running that business for decades. It's not your job to save it. You have your own life to live." She's amazing, but even she doesn't fully get it. This isn't just a job to my parents. It's their whole identity. And then there's Victor. Remember that guy I mentioned who reached out to me on LinkedIn? Well, I finally agreed to meet him. We grabbed coffee at this fancy downtown cafe, and the guy was smooth. He's in his early 40s, dressed like he just walked off the set of Succession. He told me he runs a venture capital firm and had been following my work for a while. "I've been looking for someone with your skill set," he said. "I have a project in mind that could be a game changer in the tech world, and I think you're the perfect person to lead it." I was intrigued, but also skeptical. Why me? There are plenty of software developers out there. Victor smiled. Because you're not just a developer, you're a builder. I've seen the way you think outside the box. You have the kind of vision most people lack. He laid out the details of the project, which sounded incredible. It was a startup idea involving AI and construction automation. The irony wasn't lost on me. It combined my tech background with my family's industry. But there was a catch. He wanted me to invest some of my own savings into the venture. That sent up a red flag for me. I told him I'd think about it, but Paige was suspicious from the start. This guy sounds shady, she said when I told her about the meeting. Be careful, Caleb. He might just be using you to get your money. So now I'm stuck between my family, who are pressuring me to save their struggling business, and this mysterious investor who's offering me a way out, but at a cost. I don't know what to do. Every option feels like a trap. Things took a turn after that meeting with Victor. I couldn't get his offer out of my head. On one hand, it sounded like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, building something innovative and being at the forefront of both tech and construction automation. But on the other hand, Paige's warning stuck with me. Something about him seemed a little too polished, like he knew exactly what to say to hook me in. But I'll get back to Victor later. First, let me tell you what really shook me. The family business wasn't just struggling, it was drowning. A few days after Lauren's surprise visit, I decided to dig deeper into what was really going on with the company. I don't know what pushed me to do it. Maybe Aiden's comment about my dad not telling me everything, or maybe it was Lauren's cryptic "things have been tight" remark. Either way, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. So, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I called up Mike. Mike has been my dad's right-hand man for as long as I can remember. He's been with the company for over 25 years, practically part of the family at this point. I figured if anyone knew the truth about the business, it was him. When I called, Mike sounded surprised to hear from me. Caleb, haven't heard your voice in a while. What's going on? I didn't want to beat around the bush. Hey, Mike. Look, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. How's the business doing? Really? There was a long pause on the other end. Then he said, Why are you asking me that? Shouldn't you be talking to your dad about this? I tried, I said. He's not exactly forthcoming. Mike, please. I just need to know the truth. Another pause. Then he let out a heavy sigh. All right, kid. I'll tell you what I can. But you didn't hear this from me, got it? He went on to explain that the company was in serious debt. Apparently, they'd taken on a few risky projects over the past couple of years, big developments that were supposed to bring in huge profits. But supply chain issues, rising material costs, and a couple of bad decisions had turned those projects into money pits. It's bad, Caleb, Mike admitted. Real bad. Your dad's been doing everything he can to keep the lights on. But, well, there's only so much duct tape you can put on a sinking ship. My stomach dropped. Why hasn't he told me any of this? Because Jack's a proud man, Mike said. He doesn't want anyone to know he's in over his head. And, frankly, I think he's been banking on you stepping in to save the day. I didn't know what to do with that information. Part of me wanted to confront my dad right then and there, but another part of me wasn't ready for that fight. So, I turned to Paige. That night, we sat on her couch while I explained everything Mike had told me. Paige listened quietly, her brows furrowed in concern. This makes so much more sense now, she said when I was done. Your dad isn't just being stubborn. He's desperate. Exactly, I said. And now I feel like if I don't take over, it's all going to fall apart. But if I do, I'll lose everything I've worked for. Paige took my hand. Caleb, you can't let guilt make this decision for you. If the business is in that much trouble, it's not something you can fix overnight. And honestly, it might not even be fixable. That thought hit me like a punch to the gut. The idea that the business, the thing my family had poured their blood, sweat, and tears into for decades, might be beyond saving was almost too much to process. But then things got even messier. The next morning, I got a text from Lauren. We need to talk. Come by the office. I didn't know what to expect, but I went anyway. When I walked into the office, Lauren was sitting at her desk, surrounded by stacks of paperwork. Close the door, she said. I sat down across from her, and she handed me a folder. If you're going to keep digging into this, you might as well know the whole story. Inside the folder were financial records, project bids, and what looked like loan documents. I didn't understand half of it, but one thing was clear. The company owed a lot of money. Where did all this debt come from? I asked. Bad decisions, Lauren said bitterly. Dad kept taking on these huge projects, thinking they'd pay off big. But when they didn't, he had to take out loans to cover the losses. Now we're in over our heads. And Mom knows about all of this? Lauren hesitated. She knows some of it, but not everything. Dad's been keeping her in the dark about just how bad it is. I leaned back in my chair, feeling like the walls were closing in. So, what happens if I don't take over? Lauren's expression hardened. If you don't, Dad's going to sell. But not to just anyone. There's a developer who's been circling like a vulture, waiting for us to throw in the towel. If he gets his hands on the company, he'll tear it apart and sell off the pieces. I stared at her, trying to process everything. Why are you telling me all of this now? Because you deserve to know the truth, she said. And because I'm hoping it'll change your mind. I left the office feeling more conflicted than ever. I knew my family was counting on me, but the more I learned, the clearer it became that stepping in might be a losing battle. That night, I met with Aiden to get his take. When I told him about the debt and the loans, his face went pale. Dude, this is bad, he said. Like, really bad. Your dad's been gambling with the company's future, and now he's expecting you to clean up the mess. I don't know what to do, I admitted. If I walk away, the business dies. But if I stay, I'm not sure I can save it. Aiden shook his head. Maybe it's time to let it go, man. You can't set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. Meanwhile, Victor was still in the back of my mind. His offer seemed more tempting by the day, but something about it didn't sit right with me. Paige was still wary of him, and even Aiden said, "This guy sounds too good to be true." But I couldn't shake the feeling that Victor might be my way out of this mess. The only question was whether I could trust him, or if I was about to make things even worse. I spent the next few days going back and forth in my head. It felt like every decision I made came with a catch. If I walked away from the family business, I'd be the villain in my parents' story, the selfish son who turned his back on everything they built. If I stayed, I'd be stepping into a financial disaster that I had no idea how to fix. And then there was Victor. After I left Lauren's office, I decided to meet with him again. I know Paige and Aiden both thought he was too good to be true, but I couldn't shake the idea that maybe he was the escape hatch I needed. We met at a sleek rooftop bar downtown. Victor's suggestion, of course. The guy was all charm, dressed in a tailored suit and carrying himself like someone who always gets what he wants. "Glad you came, Caleb," he said, shaking my hand. "I have a feeling this could be the start of something big." We ordered drinks, and he launched into another pitch about his project, a startup focused on automating construction processes using AI and robotics. He explained how it would revolutionize the industry, making builds faster, cheaper, and more efficient. "You're the perfect person to lead this, Caleb," he said, his tone smooth and convincing. "You've got the tech skills, and you understand the construction world. It's a rare combination." I couldn't deny it sounded like a dream opportunity. But then he dropped the catch. "Of course," Victor said, swirling his whiskey, "a venture like this requires commitment. I'd need you to invest $50,000 to get started. Think of it as a down payment on your future." 50 grand. I almost choked on my drink. Sure, I'd saved up a decent amount over the years, but dumping that much money into a project with a guy I barely knew? It felt risky, to say the least. "I'll need some time to think about it," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. Victor nodded, like he'd expected that. "Of course. Take all the time you need. Just don't wait too long. Opportunities like this don't stay open forever." When I told Paige about the meeting, she was furious. "Are you seriously considering this?" she asked, crossing her arms. "It's not like I said yes," I shot back. "But it could be a way out. A chance to build something new, on my own terms." "And what if it's a scam?" she countered. "What if this guy takes your money and runs? You don't even know him, Caleb." "I don't know, okay?" I said, running a hand through my hair. "I'm just trying to figure it all out. My family's drowning, and Victor's the only one offering me a lifeline." Paige softened a bit, but still looked worried. "I get that you're feeling trapped, But throwing money at a shady venture isn't the answer. There has to be another way. Meanwhile, things with my parents were getting worse. My dad called me again, and this time, he wasn't just disappointed. He was angry. "I don't understand you, Caleb," he said. "We gave you everything, your education, your opportunities, and now, when we need you most, you're turning your back on us." "It's not that simple," I argued. "You've been hiding the truth from me this whole time. If the business is in that much trouble, why didn't you ask for help earlier?" "Because I thought you'd step up without needing to be asked," he snapped. But clearly, I was wrong. He went on a tirade about loyalty, family, and sacrifice, and by the time he was done, I felt like I'd been chewed up and spit out. "Fine," he said finally. "If you won't help, we'll sell. But don't come crying to me when you realize you've made the biggest mistake of your life." That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept racing between my dad's ultimatum, Lauren's revelations, and Victor's offer. I felt like I was being pulled in a million directions, and no matter what I chose, someone was going to get hurt. And then Aiden called. "You're not going to believe this," he said. "But I did some digging on your buddy Victor." My stomach dropped. "What did you find?" "Well, first off, the guy's real name isn't even Victor. It's Marcus. Marcus Everett." "What?" I said, my heart pounding. "Yeah, and get this, he's been involved in at least 2 failed startups in the past 5 years. Both of them went under within a year, and both left their investors high and dry. The guy's a professional con artist, Caleb." I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. "Are you sure?" "Positive. I even found an article about one of his scams. He's good at covering his tracks, but not good enough." The next day, I confronted Victor. I told him I wasn't interested in his project and that I knew about his past. He didn't even try to deny it. "You're making a mistake, Caleb," he said, his slick demeanor slipping for the first time. "This was your chance to do something big." "Yeah, well, I think I'll pass," I said. He gave me a cold smile. "Suit yourself. But don't come crawling back when you realize you've missed your shot." With Victor out of the picture, I turned my attention back to my family. I knew I couldn't ignore the situation any longer. I went to my parents' house and sat them down. "We need to talk," I said. "What is there to talk about?" my dad asked, his arms crossed. "Everything," I said. "The business, the debt, the loans. I know it all, Dad. And I need to know why you didn't tell me the truth." My mom's face went pale. "Jack, what is he talking about?" My dad looked like he'd been backed into a corner. "I didn't want to worry you," he said to her. Then he turned to me. "And I didn't think you'd care." "Of course I care," I said. "But you can't expect me to drop everything and fix something I didn't even know was broken." The room was silent for a long time. Then my mom spoke up, her voice trembling. "Jack, we can't keep doing this. We need help. We can't keep putting all of this on Caleb." For the first time, my dad actually looked defeated. I think he realized he'd been pushing too hard, expecting too much. But even with that moment of honesty, I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The business was still in trouble, and my family was still depending on me to make a decision. The question was, what choice would I make? The conversation with my parents left me emotionally drained. My mom cried for the first time in years. Real tears, not the guilt trip kind. And my dad looked like he'd aged a decade in one night. I could tell they weren't just trying to manipulate me anymore. They were scared. And honestly, so was I. The reality was sinking in. The family business, the thing that had been the cornerstone of their entire lives, was on the verge of collapse. And despite everything, despite the guilt, the anger, the manipulation, I didn't want to be the one to let it die. But I also couldn't ignore the truth. I wasn't equipped to save it. The next day, I called Lauren and asked her to meet me at the office after hours. When I got there, she was already waiting for me, sitting at her desk with a glass of wine in hand. "Let me guess," she said. "You're here to tell me you're not doing it." "Not exactly," I said, sitting down across from her. "I'm here to figure out if we even can save it." Lauren raised an eyebrow. "You mean, together?" "Yeah," I said. "Look, I know I've been pushing back on this, but if we're going to make it work, we need to be honest with each other. No more secrets, no more guilt trips. Just the truth." For a moment, Lauren didn't say anything. Then she sighed and took a sip of her wine. All right. The truth? It's bad, Caleb. Worse than you think. If we don't figure something out in the next 6 months, the company's done. That night, we went through every financial record, every project bid, every outstanding debt. It was overwhelming. I felt like I was drowning in numbers I didn't fully understand. But one thing became clear. The business wasn't just struggling, it was bleeding out. Why didn't you tell me all of this sooner? I asked Lauren. Because I thought you'd walk away, she said. And I wouldn't blame you if you did. I shook my head. I don't want to walk away. But I also can't do this alone. The next morning, I called a family meeting. My parents, Lauren, and I sat around the dining room table, and for the first time, I laid everything out on the table. I'm willing to help, I said, but I'm not taking over. Not by myself, anyway. My dad's face hardened. Caleb, that's not how this works. If you're not all in. Stop, I interrupted. This isn't about ego, Dad. It's about survival. If we're going to save the business, we all need to work together. That means you, me, Lauren, and Mom. And we're going to need outside help, too. Real help? My mom looked hesitant, but she nodded. What kind of help? A financial advisor, I said. And maybe even an investor. Someone who actually knows how to turn this thing around. That's when Lauren dropped the bombshell. There's one more thing you need to know, she said, her voice tense. It's about Mike. What about him? I asked. Lauren hesitated, glancing at my dad, who was suddenly staring at the table like he couldn't look me in the eye. Mike's been stealing from the company, she said finally. What? I said, my voice rising. Lauren pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. I found this a few weeks ago. He's been skimming off the top of project budgets and funneling the money into a separate account. He's taken tens of thousands of dollars. My dad's face was bright red. I didn't want to believe it, he said, his voice shaking. Mike's been with us for 25 years. He's like family. But the evidence is all there. Have you confronted him? I asked. No, Lauren said. Not yet. We wanted to figure out what to do first. The news hit me like a gut punch. Mike was supposed to be the one person my dad could trust, and now he was stealing from us? It was almost too much to process. But as furious as I was, I knew we couldn't just storm into his office and start throwing accusations. We needed a plan. The next week was a blur. I took time off from my job to focus on the business, which was a decision that didn't sit well with Paige. You're really putting your career on hold for this? She asked. It's temporary, I said. I just need to help them stabilize things. Paige sighed. I just hope you don't lose yourself in the process. Lauren and I eventually confronted Mike in his office. I'll never forget the look on his face when we showed him the evidence. At first, he tried to deny it, but when we laid out everything we'd found, the bank statements, the inflated invoices, he finally broke down. I didn't mean for it to get this far, he said, his voice trembling. I had some debts of my own, and I thought I could pay it back before anyone noticed. My dad wanted to fire him on the spot, but I convinced him to hold off. Instead, we worked out a deal. Mike would repay every cent he'd stolen, and in return, we wouldn't press charges. It wasn't ideal, but it was the best option we had. With Mike dealt with, we turned our attention to the company's future. We brought in a financial advisor who helped us restructure some of the debt and streamline operations. It was a long, grueling process, but slowly, things started to improve. And through it all, I learned something surprising. I was actually good at this. Not the construction side of things, that was still Lauren's domain, but the problem-solving, the strategy, the business side of things. It was challenging in a way I hadn't expected, and for the first time, I felt like I was contributing something meaningful to my family's legacy. But there was still one more decision to make, whether or not to stay. After months of working with my family, I sat them down again and told them the truth. I'm proud of what we've accomplished, I said, but this isn't my dream. I need to get back to my own career. My dad didn't look thrilled, but he nodded. You've done more than enough, Caleb. And I'm sorry for the way I handled things. I should have been honest with you from the start. Lauren surprised me by saying, you've earned the right to live your own life. And for what it's worth, I couldn't have done this without you. Now, a year later, the business is stable. Lauren's running things. My parents have stepped back, and I'm back in the tech world, working on projects I'm passionate about. It wasn't easy getting here, but I don't regret the choices I made. I learned that sometimes, helping your family doesn't mean sacrificing yourself. It means finding a way to do what's right without losing who you are. And as for Paige, we're still together, and stronger than ever. Turns out she was right all along. You can't pour from an empty cup. Thanks for listening, everyone. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that family is complicated. But at the end of the day, the people who truly love you will want you to be happy, even if it takes a while for them to figure out how to show it.